My presentation is on sexual violence in the United States and Ethiopia. There are many problems that plague women globally when discussing sexual violence and rape. The most horrific violations of women's rights and human rights are emotional, sexual, and physical abuse, illiteracy, malnutrition, and female genital mutilation. The World Health Organization defines sexual violence as any sexual act, an attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise direct against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person regardless of their relationship to the victim in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. Although some countries view being born a female as a health hazard that could lead to premature death by their spouses or parents or strangers. Anyone can experience sexual violence, but most victims are female. The person responsible for the violence is typically male and usually someone known to the victim. The person can be a friend, an intimate lover, coworker, neighbor, or family member. Sexual violence against women has been going on all over the world since the beginning of human existence. Historically, when women have been viewed as property and should fill the role of subservice. In some developing countries, women are still perceived in this way, especially where there are high poverty and illiteracy rates. Poverty is seen in both developed and developing countries, but in certain countries, poverty seems to be the catalyst for most of these injustices. For example, a poor family will choose to favor the male child because girls are not seen as useful human beings. To this day, sexual violence is still underreported due to social norms, stigmas, and the sensitive nature of the subject. Also, religious and cultural beliefs play a factor, resulting in sex-selective abortions, lack of education in primary and secondary school for girls, neglect, sex trafficking, parents selling their female children for profit, and kidnapping to make child brides. Most prevalent areas where you see sexual violence is South and East Asia, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and India. The effects of sexual violence in developing countries, women and girls are exposed to HIV, AIDS, due to the male perpetrator having so many unprotected sexual encounters. Maternal and fetal mortality are high due to improper health care and genital mutilation, neglect, malnourishment, and high suicide rates among mothers. Now, short-term effects include sexually transmitted infections, unwanted pregnancies, injury to the vaginal area. Long-term effects include chronic pain with sex, post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, intestinal problems, arthritis, and there still are many more that are not listed here. There are many barriers women come up against when deciding whether to report the incident. Barriers like family and our intimate partners not allowing the woman to speak out, not having any local resources to aid in legal and medical assistance, not being able to afford the medical and legal costs of coming forward. Many women also have mental health problems after violence. In addition to PTSD, women can experience generalized anxiety and depression. Often to cope with effects of violence, some women start misusing alcohol or drugs or engage in risky behaviors such as multiple partners and unprotected sex. Sexual violence can distort a woman's perception of their body, leading to different types of eating disorders. Other effects can include not participating in social events, stopping activities they once enjoyed doing, shutting out family and friends, and not being able to have a healthy sexual relationship, and they have a lack of trust in most people. In some cultures, the women can be cast out of their families due to sexual violence, and previous social circles will no longer include them because they are thought of as shameful. It is estimated that the cost of one rape victim in the United States is $122,461. This includes medical costs, loss of productivity, criminal justice activities, and other costs. It is estimated that 1 in 5 women have experienced being raped or there was an attempt to being raped in their lifespan. This is usually accompanied by force and or using drugs and alcohol. Approximately 12.5% of women have been sexually coerced into unwanted sex by non-physical ways. This could include stalking, verbal threats, financial abuse, sexual harassment, trafficking. (27.3% of women have been subjected to some form of unwanted sexual contact, and more than 50% of women who are murdered every year are killed by their intimate partner. Now, sexual violence also includes both penetrative and non-penetrative acts, as well as the mentioned non-contact forms. Looking at the United States, the U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 54% of Native American and Alaskan Native women have been victims of a form of sexual violence. The highest number of sexual violence seems to lie mostly with Native American and Alaskan natives. More than 90% reported that they were assaulted by non-tribal members. Unfortunately, tribal councils are unable to hold a court on their land and punish non-tribal members. 66.4% report a psychological aggression by their partner. Now, these women report not being safe, being pushed, shoved, or beaten may describe psychological aggression and control. In the past year, over 39% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence. Of these, 14% were sexually abused, 9% were assaulted by their intimate partner, 12% were stalked, and 25% experienced psychological aggression. Along with Native American women and Alaska Native women, Black women, they have the highest murder rates among other ethnicities. In the U.S., greater than 1.5 million American Indian and Alaska Native women have suffered violence during their life. Just in the past year, over 730,000 American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced sexual violence. Ages 18 and 29 make up 36.3% of Native American women and Alaska Native women murder victims. 47% of those murdered was by an intimate partner. Current intimate partners account for 81% of the murders, and 12% are committed by previous intimate partners. Jealousy, arguments, and preceding violent acts occur before the murder, at about 66%. Human trafficking of Native American women and Alaska Native women is thought to also occur, but there is little reported data to support this. When comparing to other ethnicities, Native American women experience sexual assault and rape rates that are 2.5 higher than other ethnicities. Though the Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized in 2013, most tribes struggle to fund jails, courts, law enforcement, judges, and prevention programs. A survey was conducted on 6.64 million women with disabilities in the United States. And they specifically focused on sexual violence towards women with disabilities. 23.8% of women with disabilities for more than 1 year reported sexual violence. 53.3% of women with disabilities were aged 55 years and older, and 75.8% were white. 47.1% of women had an income of $25,000 or less, and 1.8% of the women with disabilities prior to the service reported being raped within the past year. Now, 38% of these women had some college, 30.9% did have a college degree. This study was also comparing 0.9% of women without disability who had been raped compared to those with disabilities. Almost 500,000 women with disabilities report being raped, compared to the 772,000 women without disabilities who have been raped. 6.9% of women with disabilities reported sexual violence other than rape within the past year. This totals out to be 29% of the 6.64 million disabled women surveyed. They experienced sexual violence other than rape 1 year prior to the survey. Women without disabilities who reported sexual violence other than rape was at 5.2%. This survey was conducted to determine that women with disabilities were more susceptible to sexual violence due to being reliant on caregivers, whether they are strangers or family members. And also the survey needed to determine whether the disability was either caused by the sexual assault or happened prior to. Femicide is becoming a problem in the U.S. The Violence Policy Center conducted a national analysis and a state-by-state analysis on homicide statistics. Women who were murdered by men has risen 11% between 2004 and 2016. Out of the 1,809 females murdered by males in 2016, 63% were spouses or intimate partners of the killers. Regardless of nationality, men are more likely to be perpetrators of violence against women if they have low education, a history of child maltreatment, or exposure to domestic violence against their mother. Children who witness domestic violence are more likely to become perpetrators or victims themselves, carrying on the cycle of abuse. In 2016, the average cost for a child who has been exposed to intimate partner violence in the U.S. was around $50,000. Broken down is $11,000 just for health care, $14,000 for criminal costs, $26,000 for loss of productivity since they can't go to work. Looking at Ethiopia, United Nations analysis report that domestic violence and sexual violence against women is most prevalent in Ethiopia. In 2005, the World Health Organization reported that 59% of the women reported sexual abuse by a partner in their lifetime. and 1/3 of women reported that they were physically forced to have sex against their will with their partner in the last 12 months. Due to the lack of reporting, sexual violence and rape has made gathering data very difficult to paint an accurate picture of these problems, resulting in poor and improper interventions. And this was the highest prevalence of all countries surveyed. As of 2005, 74.3% of women between the ages of 15 and 49 years old had undergone female genital mutilation. Bride kidnapping is still practiced by certain communities in Ethiopia. In 2003, the National Committee on Traditional Practices in Ethiopia reported that bride kidnapping was estimated at 72%. The premarital customs is mainly endemic to North Africa and parts near Eastern Africa and has its ultimate origins in ancient Egypt. This procedure is widely practiced and it is deeply ingrained in the local culture. Mainly encouraged and performed by the women in the community, this type of procedure is primarily intended to deter promiscuity and offer protection from assault. In 2004, the Criminal Code criminalizes this practice, as well as other forms of abuse of women, such as child marriage, trafficking, and sexual harassment. Unfortunately, these codes and laws have not been upheld due to cultural and societal beliefs. There was a survey conducted on sexual violence against female university students in Ethiopia. The study was a cross-sectional study performed on 462 women or female students at the Oyota Soda University. 57.4% of the females were in the age range of 18 to 20 years old. 98.5% of the female students, reported to be single, and 52% were from rural areas. 45.4% reported a form of sexual violence in their lifetime, and 24.4% reported sexual violence since becoming a student. Previous studies show that sexual violence against girls in school is by older male teachers. Girls feel they need to submit to teachers in order to remain in school. Now, 39.5% reported sexual violence before joining the university. 8% reported they've been sexually harassed and attempted rape within their current academic year. Among the 71 cases of rape, 55% of the females reported they had only been raped once, while 9.8% reported they had been raped multiple times in their lifetime. 62.1% thought sexual violence was not preventable, and 19% had no idea it was a crime. It was concluded that 85% of the rapists were not strangers. 57.7% were intimate partners, 22.5% were family members, and 14% were teachers and strangers. Key factors that were identified was being in the age range of 20 to 24, and coming from rural areas, having witnessed violence as a child, dated regularly, and consumed alcohol. In the United States, the U.S. has strict laws pertaining to what age a girl can consent to intercourse, marriage, and when they can enter the work labor force. The U.S. has come a long way in how women are treated as a whole, but there are still problems with sexual violence. Households that foster a sociocentric and egocentric culture, the chance for violence against females and children skyrockets. In Ethiopia, their culture supports devaluing women. Even women themselves feel they're only useful when giving birth to a son, performing duties within the household, and remaining illiterate. Due Older women within the family also reinforce this type of treatment due to their own beliefs and from being coerced by men. Most Ethiopian families still subject their daughters to arranged marriages at very young ages. The Ethiopian language, in the Ethiopian language, there are certain feminized slurs that are used over and over that compare women to animals. This type of language puts women in a lower social and monetary level to men. The Ethiopian Demographic and Health Survey of 2016 reports that the average age for the first marriage is 17, and in the Amhara district, it is 15 years of age. Cultural norms and beliefs are the ways for men and authority figures to justify genital mutilation, son preference, and child marriages. These enforce the treatment of women as inferior and take away their power as a human being and as a woman. 1.7 per 100,000 women in Africa are at risk for being violated and or killed by their intimate partner. In America, it is 1.2 per 100,000 women. In the United States, on September 13, 1994, President Clinton signed into law the Violence Against Women Act, which was drafted by then Senator Joe Biden. This act granted $1.6 billion to fund the investigation and prosecution of all violent crimes committed against women. Compensation for the female victim became automatic and mandatory. The Violence Against Women Act went on to create the Office on Violence Against Women, which falls under the Department of Justice. The Center of Disease Control implemented the Rape Prevention and Education program that works to end sexual violence by funding all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In 2005, the American Civil Liberties Union expressed that the VAWA is the most effective piece of legislation enacted to end domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. This act has dramatically improved the law enforcement response to violence against women and has provided critical services necessary to support women in their struggle to overcome abusive situations. The RPE program recipients work collaboratively with diverse stakeholders, including state sexual violence coalitions, education institutions, rape crisis centers, community organizations, and other state agency partners to guide and implement the evaluation of their state sexual violence prevention efforts. There also have been hotlines established for anybody to call. Those are the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the National Dating Abuse Helpline, the National Sexual Assault Helpline. All these lines are staffed 24/7, 24 hours a day, and 7 days a week. Ethiopia, since 2001, Mulatu Teshome became president and has successfully made some positive changes. The Ethiopian government has also formed the Ethiopian Women Association. This group is focused more on eliminating most of the dangerous cultural practices that are performed on women. Small local organizations like the Women Fight in Harar, Ethiopians have been fighting to stop parents from keeping their female children out of school. the same time, they are trying to educate men on the shame of attacking and raping young women and children. There are multinational programs that have stepped in to aid Ethiopia, like the U.S. aid has been instrumental in promoting women in Ethiopia and allowing them to have a chance to live a life free of violence and discrimination. Also, the All American Women for Peace and parts of the UN are focusing on including more women in peace talks and are working to eliminate early marriages and gender-based violence.